He has been billed Britain's biggest drug lord. HM Revenue and Customs called him the fixer. He was a big rave promoter back in the day. Andrew Pritchard.
It was the biggest drug seizure in the country. £100 million it was valued at. I grew up in East North London. Grew up as one of the worst areas in London. The dogs used to carry knives back then. Paid them out and they stole all the public interest immunity documents out of the safe. And I got them into court. The thing about criminals is we tend to know more about the law than the police because it's our craft. Curtis is a real character.
He's out now, isn't he?
Because I had everything, the big houses, the big cars. I wasn't considering really what was happening at the bottom street level because I never came in contact with that. When the warehouse thing came along, It just flipped it all on its head, led by people on mopeds. And of course the police now are frustrated because you're passing through different areas we couldn't actually coordinate anything to come and stop you. We were having everybody there. Mini Vanilli were the biggest group in the world at that time. Pet Shop Boys, Boy George was regular. I was on the run, yeah, completely on the run, you know. Andrew, this is the end. Look around the walls. All you could see, it was plainclothes police.
Welcome back to season 4 of the Criminal Connection podcast. My name's Terry Stone, aka the Podfather. I want to say a massive thank you to all our supporters, all our subscribers for sharing and viewing our YouTube channel. We've hit over 6 million views. We are well on our way to 100,000 subscribers, and that is a big thanks to you. I also want to say a massive thank you to our season 4 sponsors. Without your help and support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Big thanks to our sponsor, IME. This global tech outfit ain't messing about. They've got these slick video interviews that have you connecting like there's no tomorrow. Whether you're running a business, running the streets, or doing your own thing. Perfect for those in marketing, recruitment, admissions, and even for auditions. And their platform, smooth as silk, designed with you lot in mind. IME's the ticket to making those connections count. VIP Security services have been established for 35 years. VIP Security offers a personal security service to escort you, your family and your friends, whether on business or out for the evening. Protect what's important to you. We're watching you while others are watching us. Prevention is always better than the cure. You're in safe hands. Security solutions across Essex, London and the home counties. I want to say a huge thanks to our sponsors, Fragrance du Bois. Now, for those of you that don't know about Fragrance du Bois, where have you been? It is one of the leading luxury fragrances, only available in Harrods, Selfridges and Neiman Marcus in New York. This brand is indulging in pure luxury. It's crafted from the rarest and finest ingredients. Each fragrance tells a story of timeless elegance, and that's why the Podfather wears it. The Podfather does have a personal favourite. It's called Oud Bleu Intense. So for anybody that likes Oud Parfum, that one for me is the one. But they've got so many different fragrances for men, for women. All of the fragrances are unisex, so make sure you get involved and sample the delights of Fragrance du Bois. Every time I film an episode of the Criminal Connection podcast, every guest I've had have always said the same thing. Cool, Terry, that smells nice. What's that? And I say, it's Fragrance du Bois. And they go, what's that? And I give them a link, and I give them 10% off, and they buy a bottle. So make sure you get involved. For all the Criminal Connection podcast crew, we've got a special discount for you. 10% off. All you need to do when you click on the link below and choose your luxury fragrance is to put in CCPOD10 for the 10% discount. Just click on the link below to discover your signature scent today. So if you'd like to find out about any of our fabulous sponsors, make sure you check out the links in the description below. Welcome back to the Criminal Connection. My name's Terry Stone, and today we've got a very special guest. He has been billed Britain's biggest drug lord. The HM Revenue and Customs called him the fixer. He was a big rave promoter back in the day, so welcome Andrew Pritchard.
Woo! Don't know about the clapping and the applause, but you know.
No, we want you to feel like, you know, you're walking into somewhere, you know.
Yeah, well, I feel honoured to be here, don't I?
No, listen, mate, you know, obviously we've sort of known of each other for years, but it's funny, isn't it? Like, you know, I started off as a raver in the late 80s, early 90s, and obviously I went to your raves. And we never met, but it's funny, sort of, you know, you fast forward
25 years, and here we are.
You was obviously a lot younger than me.
I can't be that much younger. How old are you now, Ev?
56 now. I should keep that secret,
Oh, 52,
really.
mate. So there's only 4 years between us. But I'm fascinated, Andrew. Where did you actually sort of grow up? Was you sort of London or?
Yeah, I grew up in East North London,
Right.
Stoke Newington.
Right.
Back then, it was pretty, it was described as one of the worst areas in London, which it probably was. I mean, the dogs used to carry knives back then, you know what I mean?
I always used to call, it's funny, like sort of that area, and then obviously east and then south and then sort of Tottenham. If you sort of went like that with a circle, it was the Wild West, wasn't it?
It was. Well, it was the crossroads as well, because the crossroads was Dalston Lane, Dalston Junction. So that used to cross from, you had North London to the right-hand side, which then literally crossed the road. It was M1 postcode, N16, which led you down the road to Stoke Newington and Clapton, and then took you down further, into Islington, Debover. And as you literally crossed the junction, it was in East London. Right. So that led you into Hackney, Yeah. So it was the Wild West. It was sort of like no man's land.
What was it like growing up in that environment?
It was a great study of life, because you got to understand back then, we going in the 60s, because I was a child born in 1966, and when you're going to the age of sort of like 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're growing up in that sort of environment, it was it was a cultural melting pot. That's how I could describe Stoke Newington. Certainly, it was a place where you had a lot of the immigrants coming from the West Indies. They settled there. Windrush generation, their kids, were spawned there. And, so that was a great mix and stuff. But then you find a lot of cultures trying to use it as their first port of call. It always has been, as Brick Lane was the Jewish community, then it moved into the Bangladeshi community, and people took over those properties and the rag trade, things like that. Stoke Newington is obviously one which was, probably the West Indian community. Now the Kurdish community have got a big presence in that area. But it was, a real kind of learning experience to mix with so many cultures and to learn about my own, because my mother is Jamaican. Obviously, my father's an East End boy. So I was able to, really kind of get the two understanding of both upbringings, both cultures, all mixed into one.
I do like the Jamaican food. So,
well, the Sunday dinner was actually a great one, because Sunday dinner was rice and peas and roast potatoes.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So you had the combination. If it was going down, it was, you had your Sunday roast beef, and you also had stewed chicken at the side.
Happy days.
Do you know what I mean? So it was
I've always
fusion
liked
of
those
cultures.
I always loved that buffet concept.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And I love to cook now, funny enough.
Oh, right.
It's something I inherited from my mum, I think, and along the way I've been involved in restaurants and bits and pieces I've probably invested and got involved in, and so my culinary skills have kind of got better as I've got older.
I've always wanted to learn to cook, but I've always disciplined myself not to, because I love food, and I just know that if I learn to cook, I'm going to be about 50 stone.
Well, I'll tell you what, the proof's in the pudding. Look at me now. Do you know what I mean? It's what it is. But food's a therapy for me, Cooking is a way of relaxation. And it's really funny because I always like to cook, and even when I went away in the dispersal system, cooking is a big part of prison,
Right.
The Cat A's basically, it's the only thing you get, people.
Is it a bit like Goodfellas when they do this?
It actually is, yeah. Like regular prisons, like regular prisons, they cook in a kettle and all that. When you're in Lifers prison, the dispersal system, it is because you get to buy food. You're on what they call a food boat. And you buy, your pieces of chicken, your steaks, you buy your spices, your seasoning, and like a little group of you do what they call a food boat. Right. So the food boat is each week you'll put a certain amount of money and you'll go through the menu, the canteen shit, and buy it. Like on my food boat was Curtis Warren. So Curtin used to cook classic tandoori chicken. Right. That was Curtis's speciality. Right. And I had a couple other guys who were on there, who were still in the system. So I won't say who they are because they're still doing life sentences in there, But
what was Curtis like? What was he like?
Curtis is a real character. Curtis is full of life and he's as fit as a fiddle.
He's out now, isn't he?
Curtis is, he's that,
Well, if you're watching this, mate, we want to get you on.
He had a little issue the other day and stuff. I saw what happened there. Basically, they said he breached his serious crime prevention order by having a phone, because it's one of these things. They give you the sentence, which is a punishment in itself, and then added to that, there's a confiscation order, which is additional punishment. Right. And now you get these things called serious crime prevention orders. So for 5 years, like I'm on one at the moment, you can have one mobile phone. You're not allowed to have a car that's not registered in your name. You can't be a passenger in a vehicle without notifying them. You can't get into a taxi without giving 24 hours notice first. I mean, you know, it's like this massive book of rules, you know.
But you've got to be
almost
careful you
slip
don't
up.
get pissed and fucking forget.
Well, you know, it's as simple as you being on your phone now and saying someone's on the phone, you want to speak to you, and I'll take your phone. The minute I answer that phone, bang, I'm back in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. So young people getting involved in crime, these are the things they don't actually see. They see the glamorous side, you know, but when it all goes wrong, it isn't just going and getting that huge sentence and the other stuff that goes with it. It's the after effect of that as well, you know, it lingers for years.
I mean, that's the one thing that everyone I've ever spoken to who has either been involved in crime, you know, or has been, you know, wrapped up in crime for whatever reason, they've all, you know, it's not really, it's something that I think, you know, people, it seduces people in, and people go, oh, you know, I'd love to have that money, I'd love to do this, I'd love to do that. It's like his kids on his estates growing up now, they see the guy in a nice car with a watch and the diamonds and the cash, and, you know, he's spending money, he's got the girls, and he's got, you know, Dior trainers, and he's got the, you know, Versace t-shirts, and they'll go, I want to be like that. But then when you actually go through that system, you know, nobody really says to you, it's a little bit like being at school. Nobody actually says to you, well, if you, when you leave school, if you want to set up a business, what you got to do, you just go out and they assume everyone's going to get a normal job and do a job for life. But with criminals, people fall into that space, but they don't actually fully understand what they're getting into, I think.
Well, what it is, you know what it is, right? I'll tell you the truth. With people who get involved in crime and they stay in it for years, it's the bravado about it. And they actually, you know, and even when they're rotting in prison, they don't want to actually come out and just say, look, it's all a lie. Everything you've been told, everything you've been taught, it's all a bag of bullshit. Right. And, you know, it's you know, the kids who get involved in it now are almost cannon fodder, because they'll never achieve anything like they possibly think they get. And as you said, you know, they see guys with the basic stuff, cars, you know, a nice watch, pretty girlfriend coming onto the estate. And unlike, you know, other places where, you know, someone can come from a background like that and then become a premiership footballer, let's say in America, example, basketball player, they graduate from the projects, they can maybe find their way into college, they can find themselves playing pro basketball, playing pro football, you know, being a sports athlete, being an entrepreneur. Unfortunately here, we're really limited to what there is. Right. And, you know, young people see a guy, they affiliate him to say, okay, he's got this, he's selling drugs, so that's what I want to do. What they don't see is the flip side of that coin. I see the flip side of that coin when it all goes wrong. Right. And when it all goes wrong, you know, you look at the basic standards of what they got, and, you know, they're successful probably as a nice watch, a car and a pretty girlfriend, and as my friend said, a few holiday pictures. Right. But as soon as they go and get a big sentence now behind it, the car and the watch is automatically gone as part of the confiscation order, probably with additional, you know, stuff, because all the money they've spent and they put through their bank account, or the police have said they spent, they've got to pay all that back or do additional time. Yep. Then they find themselves in prison, and the story's all too familiar, you know. They get a big sentence. Most of these young guys just don't get a sentence for having a bit of drugs. They're involved in street gangs. They're involved in all kinds of stuff. They catch a couple of bodies. Suddenly they've got a murder sentence on them of joint enterprise or wherever it's going to come. They're on a big, long sentence. They get kicked up the road in dispersal. And then suddenly, you know, the girlfriend comes for the first couple of visits, because obviously you tell you're going to get an appeal. That lasts for about 18 months. When you realise the pill process is exhausted, suddenly you start to see the kids coming on the visit. They're getting a little bit older, a little bit older. That drops away because she can't afford to come up there, you know, to all over, you know, Britain where they send you with no control whatsoever. And then maybe they find someone else, the young women, they want to, you know, have more kids, have a family, not going to wait for you for 30 years. So there's no more visits coming from there. Parents probably get older, can't afford it, become a burden on the system. It's a horrible nightmare. Yeah. If the truth be known, you couldn't even start to describe some of the stuff that comes with it.
So if you're thinking about doing crime, don't try this at home.
Yeah, definitely not.
So if you committed a crime, right, you know, whether you killed someone or you sell drugs or whatever, and you know, you would you say the majority of people would just appeal anyway, just because they want to try and get off, even if they've done it? Or do you think people, I mean, there's obviously a lot of innocent people in prison, and there's obviously a lot of guilty people in and out of prison, right? But if you actually get nicked, go to jail, you're doing your time, do the majority of people just go, actually, I'm going to appeal it just to see if I can get out?
this is the reality with criminals, especially people who've been in the game for a long, long while.
Right.
And this is the problem with rehabilitation. Well, we're so underdeveloped in terms of rehabilitation in this country. So, as a criminal, okay, and this is how it always works, and you've got to understand a bit about how the justice system works now. So you get caught, you get locked up, and the bigger the case is, the more money the solicitors get paid on legal aid, more money the barristers get. You're automatically going to fight the case, all right? Whether you're as guilty as sin, you're going to fight the case. So you set about waiting for disclosure to see what the police have got on you. Right. And that's where you go, no comment in interview or give a silent interview. Then you look at the depths, all the stuff they've got, and then you tailor a defence around that. Right. So you try to track the phone records, you can sort of get yourself out of that. You look at the observation logs, and you create this magical story. Right. And what happens is you tailor that while you're locked up for maybe 12 months while you're waiting to go to trial. Right. You go up there and you then, tell them this fabulous story, do your best, your solicitors try, your barristers to get you out of the situation. Then it goes wrong because the jury comes back, they find you guilty, you get this sentence. Now, what then people do is the process is you've got a big sentence behind you, you're thinking, right, I've got to go for an appeal with this. But all the time you're convincing yourself you're innocent, you're as guilty as sin. Because you know what you've done, but you've told yourself you tailored this story so magnificently great that you've actually convinced yourself. Right. So then you go on this appeal process and you're getting more and more invested in this lie that you've created rather than thinking about, I'm going to rehabilitate, right? Anyway, and that's the process. And then what does happen is you're then exhausted all your appeal avenues, you're sitting there with this big sentence ahead of you, and you're in denial. Right. So rather than thinking, what the fuck am I talking about? Of course I'm lying. Do you know, I'm sort of the bollocks. I've done it for court. Now what can I do to get off of this fucking ladder? What do I do now to progress in the system? Instead of that, they're walking around the wings telling everyone they're innocent. Now, in the greatest respect, there are some people in prison who are generally, not guilty of the crimes they've been accused of and sentenced for. But in a lifeless prison, like Whitemore, where I've been, we had maybe, I suppose if you calculated the recs, because sentences, usually half, but recs are full sentence. But if you worked on the basis of that, out of 40 cells, there's 1,500 years in prison sentences. And within that prison, it's a lifeless prison. So majority of people are murders, 2-3 murders behind them, things like that. I would say 98% of the people in there, said they were innocent. Right. So if the police were actually doing that,
probably just thinking,
we'd have a terrible police force.
I'm innocent. I didn't do it.
So the reality of it's like that, and that's the problem as well. At some point, you've got to sort of get with reality. Do you know what I mean?
So if you, get found guilty and you're doing this, time or whatever, if you appeal, am I right in saying that it's like a win-win? Because if you appeal and you lose, it don't matter because you're still doing what you're doing. Or if you appeal and you win, you get out. Is there any risk or not?
Yes, there is, because basically, and I've seen that to quite a few people. Right. So what happens is these are the drawbacks of appealing. Right. And, in a sense, if it's not a strong appeal. So when you put in your first appeal, naturally, what will happen is that costs you nothing, right? But when it goes before the first judge, he has a form to tick. Now, if he says the appeal has merit, okay, he then allows that to go through up to the 3 judges. Then you sit on a proper appeal and you go before 3 judges at the Court of Appeal. If he then ticks it that it says no, the appeal's load of bollocks, hasn't got no merit, and then you persist to go to the 3 judges, which you can do, what they can then do is restart your sentence. Right. So you can be in there for 2 years, 2.5 years, waiting for this point of appeal.
So the gamble is you might get out.
You could get more bird.
That 2 years.
You get more bird. Yeah, you're effectively doing more sentence. So there is a drawback to it. Also, while you're appealing, obviously you're in a situation you can't progress. Right. So it's a situation whereas, if it's a smaller sentence, you can't be moved from where you are because, you can't come down in categories, because obviously you're sitting as a BCAT prisoner, you're uncategorised and you're caught into that limbo chain. So you can't actually sell. Right. If you are stepping up and you are going into the big prisons, like if you set off as a Cat A prisoner and you're going up the road, you're in a situation again, whereas, because you're appealing, any course you can probably be doing to try to develop and, work towards your progress, you can't because you're claiming to be an innocent man. So if you're an innocent man, you've got no need to do courses to rectify your behaviour. Yet your OASIS report and your OMU says you've done it. Do you know what I mean? Fix them up.
So if somebody was obviously going to court and they knew that they were guilty and they knew, actually, I'm probably going to go to jail here, right? If they actually put their hands up and plead guilty, do they not get a lesser sentence?
Yeah, they get a set. Well, listen, people, they go to prison or they get arrested, okay, and they hold back the disclosure and they hit the disclosure with you like a little while after to see all the evidence they got.
Right.
9 times out of 10, people know they're up to the neck in it, and they probably would go guilty. But the lawyers want to track it out because they get paid. So the lawyers, the longer they keep you in there in the system, the more money they get.
Right. So
people were deceived by this a lot, and they think, I've got a great lawyer saying to fight the case. A lot of them actually just fill in their pockets from you, you know. Now, because legal aid pay for it, you know, unless you're paying privately, and it's a different story. But you know, majority of cases are legal aid funded. Now, all these things you've got to take into account, consideration, and also you've got the other kind of cases. Like, listen, someone's being convicted or someone's being tried for murder. Right. You're going to get a 25-year at a 30-year rec. Are you really going to put your hands up to that? Do you know what I mean? Right. You're going to think to yourself at the end of the day, am I going to go up and put myself up and throw myself on the sword? So people will take a chance and fight. And some younger people, older people as well, now with joint enterprise. I mean, this is a terrible law. And
what is? I don't even know what that means. What is?
Okay, so joint enterprise, and this is one you've got to really take on board. It was a law that was created 300 years ago for people who went dueling. When they used to go and you'd offend your missus and I'd offend my missus. So we'd go up to the moors with 2 guns, take 10 paces each side and turn around and fire the pistols. Got it, right? And what happened was they used to do this, and the crowds used to go up there basically to see the gunfight. And basically they said the mob, the crowd was encouraging it to happen. So they decided if this happened, it would be called joint enterprise. So if someone is killed or seriously injured at an event and you're there, or you're inciting it, you're up for murder. Right. So the idea was to dispel that idea. But what happened was, why they put it to the side was because the physicians were going up there as well to patch them up when they got shot, and they were getting nicked as well. So they figured it was probably a pretty bad idea. Right. But round about the turn of the millennium, police were having difficulties with these spiking gangs. Kids were out there was mob-handedly going and killing each other. Right. And the police thought, what could they do to be able to get capture of it all? So they figured, if we can round them all up, nick 10 of them, what's going to happen is, if you ain't killed anyone, in their eyes, you're going to turn and say, I didn't do it, Terry done it, I mean, shot him. But of course they don't do it because they're frightened for the comebacks, they think they're going to snitch, all the other, things that come with it. And of course the solicitor tells them as well, come, you ain't done it, you'll be out of it. Well, of course, the case goes to court, it goes to the jury, and the word foresight was put into place. So they were sent out to deliberate, and they said, if Terry had the foresight that Andrew was going to walk into that podcast, and shoot the director, you're guilty as well.
Yeah. Now, can you not do that? Because we do need him for the rest of the season.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about it earlier, actually, was it gun? Right? So it was a mad one. And, it was like, it stayed in law. And juries generally didn't know. But how can you read someone's mind? You don't know what I'm going to do. I suppose
the problem is, and I know this is, again, a lot of the kids now, they're putting it on social media, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're doing this. And it's literally like, so them say, well, I didn't know I was going to do it. It's like, well, why was you all singing about it?
Well, look, what it is. These young people, they actually put themselves in prison because what they do and what they go out and do it. I mean, without joint enterprise, without any of these things, as you said, they'll go on a video, do a video, they're going to stab her, they're going to shoot her, they're going to kill. What do you think is going to happen when someone does get killed and that video is going into a courtroom?
You're getting next, aren't you?
You're finished. The jury's going to look at that and say, listen, this guy's premeditated murder. Do you know what I mean? And you're gone. And the reality of it is, that's how it ends up 9 times out of 10. And it's a very sad situation because there are people who haven't, thrown a punch or drew a blade, and I know some of those people, and they're doing 20-year, 18-year recs as part of a joint enterprise. But honour to them, they're not going to specifically say you've done it. And even when people have come out and said, you know what, it was nothing to do with it, I've done it all, they just don't care because it's a secure conviction.
You said something earlier which was interesting. You said obviously when people, the more sort of educated criminals, when they get interviewed, they either do no comment or a silent comment. They wait to see obviously what they've got, and then they, come up with a story or whatever. But I know when you get arrested, and I can't remember the exact thing, but there's something along the lines of, if you don't obviously answer the questions, then it can be used against you in court.
Yeah, the reference used to be to that. Then they do say
you probably know it better than me. But
yeah, so the reference was always, but you turn around and say, the vice solicitor, I'm not answering any questions, therefore I'm giving no comment interview, and then the police will then turn around and say, if you don't, say anything and you continue to give no comment interview, will be played before the court, and they can take a reference, that you're presumably guilty while you're not speaking. Right. And my answer to that, when I used to give no comment interviews, was, well, if my doctor told me I've got a chest pain and I'm going to have a heart attack, take a tablet, I'm not going to not take the tablet because he's a doctor. This is telling me not to answer a comment. Do you think I'm going to sit here and tell you anything? And I would cut them off like that. But, as time progressed, I realised with the advancement, obviously, of, voice recordings, things like this that they were able to do, analyse what your voice sounds, all these kind of things. The best option was to just actually don't even say nothing, not even give your name. Right. Just literally sit there silent, because, it's all a game, remember, and the judicial system's been played like this for years in two balances. So the first balance is, that interview process, and the police try to sort of jeer it along a little bit, and they'll put things on the tape like, oh, are you smiling, Mr Pritchard? Are you this? Are you that? Knowing it's a blind audience when the tape goes out there. So you'd come back with, sarcastic answers that would make them look a little bit stupid. And then the process continues when you go to court. Obviously, it's a game of trickery. It's a theatre. That's what it really is. Everyone's dressed up, the barristers in their wigs and their gowns, everyone's sitting there. And you use two versions of events being told, and the judge is supposed to be the referee. Right. Well, the old school criminals, back in the day, you used to go about a lot of stuff, because you used to be able to throw, cards of corruption in there, or a whiff of corruption, and you could balance things out. You could catch them out all the time, because they would fiddle their notebooks a little bit if the surveillance didn't quite add up. So they'd sit the debrief. The police would work out what they're going to say to sort of fit the story, and you'd have to sort of pull it apart. And the judge would generally be there to help, see clear of that. But as more and more people could use the art of confusion in the courtroom, and the juries generally were confused, and more not guilties were coming up, the police introduced what they call noble cause corruption. And if they see that you are, they know you're guilty, they've only been out for a very long time, they got something called PII, Public Interest Immunity Documents, which are intelligence documents built by the police and the intelligence agencies who could have been investigating you for years, and stuff you've got away with, loads of stuff you've got away with it. But you think you got away with it, but it's all there on logs. Now, the judge gets that file, public interest immunity, so he knows all the stuff that you've been doing for years and years and years. Right. So when you're trying to get through it...
I've never even heard of this.
You'd have heard of it, yeah.
That's on every single...
Every single, criminal of a certain level has public interest immunity on him.
Never even heard of that.
Well, in a big case in 2006, that's what happened. When I was on trial, was involved with Bent Customs. I was paying them off to clear containers, and then I had a team of Bent NCA basically who were prosecuting us, and they ended up also getting them in our pockets. We paid them out, and they stole all the public interest immunity documents out of the safe, and I got them into court.
It's just mad.
Yeah, I physically got them into court. I had them brought in. I was so mad because how I was getting them brought in. At the time, I was in a category of prison. I was at Wandsworth, which was a category B holding prison. And I had someone on the outside do I think it was Rule 33 or 36 stamp, which was solicitor's rule, which meant once that had it on the envelope, it couldn't be opened because it was solicitor's, confidentiality. So I was getting the public interest immunity documents in, and I was having it stamped on the outside. So the screws were actually delivering it myself, thinking it's disclosure, like that's going to sink me, not knowing it's the very card that's going to get me out of prison. Right. And it was hilarious because it never even happened in a court before. It's actually referenced in the Archibald, that case. Right. So I brought them in, I smuggled a bundle of them into my jacket pocket. When I was going to give evidence, I pulled them out and started reading off of them. But of course, I wasn't reading from those documents because those documents were saying I was guilty of sin.
Right.
But I knew the jury could never see those documents.
Right.
My own legal team couldn't even see those documents. The only person who had privilege to see those was prosecution and the judge.
Right.
So when I went there and I put on this whole parade, basically, straight away when they bundled on me, all this grill security, they closed the court down, they dragged me out, and obviously to see what was going on. So when the jury's come back, the first thing obviously they said to the judge is, what's he talking about? He says he's innocent. What are these documents he's trying to give us? So the judge, in his undivided wisdom, said to them, they're not to be mentioned, those documents, forget about them. Well, you can't exactly tell a jury to forget about something. The man says he's innocent, right? So then every time the prosecutor was coming back to ask a question, I was referring back to the documents. The judge is trying to gag me every minute, like, don't you refer to them, don't refer to them. The jury's coming back with notes. So it got to the stage that the foreman sent another note back to the judge. The judge looked at it and said, right, if you mention this again, you will be down in the holding cells with Pritchard. So if you say that to a jury of getting up every morning away from their families,
they're going to get the ump.
And they're sitting there, can you imagine listening to all this? And I'm saying I'm innocent, and the judge is then effectively gagging them. Right. It looks like it's a fit up,
So this is also an interesting question. So the judge is sitting there.
Yeah.
And this is anybody, right? And he's got these documents, right? And he knows that you're...
He knows you're guilty of sin.
Yeah, well, he knows that you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Does the judge then have to basically be not really, but be neutral with both, or
He's
does he
supposed to be neutral?
Or do you think that if he knows, then he starts to sort of help?
Of course he knows, because remember, most judges have been either defence barristers or prosecution barristers anyway, so they pretty much know the fabric of the kind of people that he's up, that he's in front of. So he's supposed to be neutral because PII, if they had enough evidence, they would have convicted you or at least charged you. But the reality of it is you've probably been a slippery custom like I was over the years, and they've never ever got enough to put the cuffs on, But if they have put the bracelets on, you've managed to slip out of it, do you know what I mean? Because you've always covered your back, Right. So he knows pretty much that you know the routine, you know the road. So when he's kind of trying to direct the jury in certain arguments, of course he favours with the police, and he tries to make an argument. If he goes too far, that's when it becomes appealable, because they, especially with his summing up speech, so when he sums it all up basically, before he sends them away to deliberate, how he does that is the biggest point of appeal. So you might say something which is untoward or misleading to the jury, and then your barrister will take all that down and then present it. The thing about criminals is we tend to know more about the law than the police or the actual, barristers and solicitors sometimes.
Is that just,
because it's our craft?
Is that because obviously when you're in that world, you share information and people sort of advise you unofficially?
It's that as well, and that's a great part of it, because you're in like a university or a college of criminals. So yeah, you're sharing information, you're learning stuff, but also if you're remanded, you're getting all this stuff which is coming into you, which is disclosure. Bigger the case, the more disclosure. So you're actually reading up and you're learning how their mechanisms work. And at the same time, you're going down to the library, getting the Archibald, looking at case law. So you're actually studying law from a criminal's perspective all the time you're away. So within itself, you've got this whole bold understanding of how the system works, know? And that's, 9 times out of 10, it can work out for you, and it can work out really bad for you as well, because when you're that tricky and that slippery, the judge pretty much wants to, doesn't want you around because he knows you're a problem.
Right.
So that's one side of it. But it's funny because all my life, for 35 years as a criminal, even from doing things which were relatively on the, the low spectrum, like the warehouse parties, to, up to the way to international drug smuggling.
Right.
But the last turnout for me was a change of mindset, because I decided I was actually going to change.
Right.
And I remember reading somewhere, if you study for 10,000 hours, you become an expert authority on something.
That's true.
And I looked at it and thought, you know what, if I'm locked up in a cell for 24 hours, I'm going to be, at least 12 hours of those, I'm actually on the prison doing nothing. 365 years in a year, if I effectively spend 3 years there, just taking in my environment, which I'm going to do naturally anyway, for a minimum of 10 hours a day, I've got 11,500 approximately hours of learning. I'm going to come out of an expert authority. So I decided at a earlier stage of my sentence, I was actually going to do that. So I progressed You know, mentally, I put my mind in a space that I was going to work my way through the systems, through the Cat A's, the Cat B's, Cat C's, into the Cat D's. Earlier on, and this was a genuine, concern I had, was the kids who were involved in gangs doing these huge sentences, the conflict, especially at Belmarsh, where they were coming in, they were clashing, and it was a nightmare. And I felt guilty because I'd always told myself my crimes were victimless, but they weren't. Smuggling drugs was not a victimless crime. To me, I looked at it because I had everything, the big houses, the big cars, the great luxuries, but I wasn't considering really what was happening at the bottom street level because I never came in contact with that. But the children, broken homes, you know, kids getting groomed into gangs, you know, poverty being created from, you know, single parent families, all the stuff which was created from people taking drugs that I was supplying, you know, the deaths, the destruction, the misery. And I said to myself mentally, it's time now that I give it all up. It's time now that I take responsibility for what I've done. I claim that. I claim the glory, let me claim the shame. Right. And I made that conscious decision, and I got involved in creating a mediation program, which basically meant getting guys who are doing big sentences in the prison system. A lot of them were big jointed at price, dirty, rare, Rex plus like that, who were gang affiliated, leaders in most cases of some postcode gangs, and brought them in, you know, to train them basic skills in mediation and understanding conflict resolution. And as young guys were coming to the prison, we were going down, they were spotting them. They would never tell the security, you know, if they're asked if they're part of a gang, they say no because it's an aggravating factor when they go to court, bigger sentence. But we shared it with us, and we wouldn't pass on to the security. It stayed there here with us. And then we used to get them put on a different wing. And then mediate the problem. So I bring two senior gang members in, they sit there, they say, look, this situation, you've got a problem with him, you've got a problem with him. While you're in here, you know, kill it, leave it dead. And then there's incentives as well. Peacock's Gym helped us, got involved, and they put on supportive stuff with us, people coming in and speaking. And we also get an extra gym session for the guys. Yeah. And it was a great course. It rolled out into Belmarsh. You know, the violence reduction was reduced massively, became a safer environment. And I thought, I can do this. I thought this is actually a skill I can learn. And what I'd done was I just progressed doing it throughout my sentence, you know, developing stuff, writing stuff, building courses. The day I was released, I formed a CIC, which a year later became a charity. And today we work in prisons across the country, we work in the community. You know, I mean, we got some of the, you know, the most best contracts, I could say, in the criminal justice system. They're coming in every day because we've taken on people with lived experience, guys who, you know, have been around the block. And I remember someone telling me one day, and I remember it was in prison actually, they had a £50 note, put a £50 note up and said, £50 note, who wants it? Everyone, hands up. Took the £50 note, screwed it up, goes, who wants it? Every hand up. Took it through on the floor, scrubbed on it, who wants it? Every hand up. Picks it up, spat on it, who wants it? Every hand up. She says, hold on, it's been bruised, it's been battered, it's been spat on, it's been rubbed through the dirt, right? Why do you want it? Because it ain't lost its value. Right. With us, we go to prison, we get ourselves into some scrapes, you get called all kinds of things. Maybe you ain't got such a great reputation, but you've not lost your value. Right. You've still got potential to be that person that you were in the beginning. See what I mean? So in my mind, it didn't matter to me, you know, and I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I was going to take my lived experience, and rather than, you know, shy away from it, embrace it and say, right, okay, you know, I have got lived experience and I've done all this shit, do you know what I mean, for years and years and years and years. But the reality of it is, and now I want to give something back. I want to tell them all, it's all a lie. All this stuff you're hearing, all this dream that you're following, it ends up in death, destruction or misery. That's where it'll end up, you know, in a box or behind a prison door. And that's the greatest thing I can give back. Do you know what I mean, Terry?
Yeah.
Because
is this your foundation?
Yeah,
this
that's the AP Foundation. As I said, you know, and I didn't grow it as a vanity project because a lot of people want to grow vanity projects. I generally wanted it to grow into become a purposeful meaning and contribution, because my parents were community leaders, and a big part of it was because of them. Them dying gave me the insight to not leave a legacy of distress, death, destruction, misery behind, but leave one of honour and pride and community, you know?
I think it's great that you've gone through that process and then you've decided, like you said, 35 years on, to change and to actually do some good. I mean, you never know, you might even get knighted. I might be calling you Sir Andrew Pritchard.
I don't know if I'll go that far, but I'll tell you the truth. They do give out a lot of MBEs and OBEs in this profession, right? As I said, get up to the CBEs and the knighthoods are very doubtful. But if I'm honest with you, to have a dong or to have a little bit of thing to say you've had an accomplishment, to be a member of the British Order, in the greatest respect, you know, it's not on my running list. My running list is to actually do meaningful stuff that is actually really going to work. And if anything like that, you know, discredited it, because it would something like that can discredit it, because people no longer believe that you're pure, that you're now part of the system, and you're not part of the reality of what's really goes on. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, all I want to do is get the job done. If something did happen like that, I'm not going to turn around and say to myself, I'm going to throw it in their face, because I won't, because it could open doors to do more and more work.
Do you know what? I've always looked at the honours system, you know, in that, you know, people get recognised. I mean, I know some people play it and they do it so that they get recognised, but the majority of people just go about their business, do their stuff, and, you know, if they do get something, whether it's an MBE, a CBE, an OBE, a knighthood or whatever, you know, it's normally just to pat you on the back and say what you're doing's good, right?
It's what it is, because, you know, MBEs, for example, you know, you're endorsed by two people, and obviously they put forward what it is that you do, and, you know, the contributions have to be valuable to society, and you made a benefit. You know, some of my trustees on my foundation are, you know, OBEs and things like this. So I'm familiarised with the system, you know. But a lot of people, very, very ordinary people, are given MBEs. And you're right, it's something to just say, we recognise what you're doing. No one else does, but we do. The community centre that you work in with those kids every single day, and you getting up every morning and going down, giving out food to the homeless.
I think I'd be a nightmare though if I got one. I might just be wearing it all the time. I'm an MBE, you know. I'm a CBE.
yeah, I can imagine.
And I bet some of them drive people mad. You know, every time they have a conversation, you do know that I'm a CBE. And then they get the little box set. Look, just so you know that I'm telling the truth.
I can imagine they do,
but, you know, we've talked a bit about the foundation and your journey, but what I'd love to do is go like back to, you know, we were talking about, obviously, you growing up. When you was at school, were you academic, or did you out?
No, not at all. But basically at school, I wasn't a particularly mischievous child. I was quite a good child at primary school. All I remember, went to secondary school. I went to a school called Philip Magnus, which was notorious with criminals, especially ones from North London. Most of them seemed to go there, or William Collins. So that was the first route of, you know, to destruction.
So you think so pretty much, really, that was probably when you got introduced?
It was a jump-off point for me, you know, and obviously my parents realised where it was all going, and they tried to, you know, divert it, because Philip Magnus was a notorious school in King's Cross, and it was getting closed down and amalgamated with Highbury Grove. They realised it was just getting worse to worse, and they didn't want to move me from the area, so they tried to do that and put me at school in Edmonton. That was not a good idea. I was a North London boy, you know, like Arsenal supporter. I was going to go up in territory of Tottenham. It wasn't going to work, full stop. And then obviously I just took a disliking to the whole idea of it, so I refused to go to school after that and bunked up every single day.
So what would you say would be, yeah, when you start hanging around with these characters, like you said, you're a product of your environment, you know, what would you say was the sort of first crime stuff that you got involved in on the sort of small level?
Yeah, nonsense, I suppose. When I was about 15 years old, I was obviously, you know, intrigued by weed, marijuana, things like that. And then that was the first, obviously, jump-off point, because I had access to it, because obviously, you know, being West Indian, and my parents knew a lot of people, so I would get to know older people, and I had a lot of white friends, so therefore I could, you know, put, you know, weed on them to sell. And then, you know, it kind of developed from there. Then I started to get involved in a bit of rougher stuff, robberies, things like that. And then it became a spiral. Music drove me, though, to obviously do stuff, because I was putting on illegal parties long before all these raves.
When I grew up, I was sort of around a lot of West Indians and a lot of Jamaicans and a lot of, you know, I grew up on reggae, R&B, hip-hop. You know, I think when I was like 12, I was breakdancing. And I had the Volkswagen necklace, you know. I wanted to. I was a fourth Beastie Boy, a fifth Beastie Boy, you know. But you know, I was always obsessed with it, and obviously, you know, around that, you see people smoking marijuana. I never touched any of that stuff when I was sort of young, because I just looked at it, and I mean, I probably did take it inadvertently, because if you're in a room where everyone's smoking it, you kind of get a little bit stoned. But I didn't like smoking. I remember probably when I was 13, I tried a cigarette and I didn't like it. And I found out later on that I actually had a tobacco allergy. So
Right.
that's obviously why I never
Explain
got
that.
into smoking weed.
Yeah.
But that's the parties that you were putting on, like the illegal ones. What were they like, house parties or?
So remember this, I was doing this stuff when I was 15 years old.
Right.
And they were blues parties. So those were
Right.
basically reggae parties, shebeens, blues dances. So, it was a dominantly black audience, and marijuana was the thing. Cocaine, ecstasy, cocaine existed, but it was looked down at. If someone was putting coke up their nose,
Right.
it wouldn't be something that they'd be proud of doing.
Right.
It was a white person's drug, in all fairness, So marijuana was the drug of the day.
Right.
I was doing, obviously, blues parties. We were breaking into houses or using squats and putting on events, charging £3 a ticket. As I keep telling people,
That was a lot of money then.
Well, this is, if you ever speak to DJ Hype, Kevin, he will tell you exactly the same thing, because we used to obviously work together with a sound system back then when we was kids, and that was the choice of the month, going out, giving out these flyers, doing this thing. When the warehouse thing came along, it just flipped it all on its head, because the clientele was dominantly white.
Right.
But the concept of doing raves was exactly the same. It just meant breaking into warehouses as opposed to breaking into houses.
Right.
Still going in and stringing up the sound system. The only additional thing is you had lights.
Right.
Of course, the big ingredient was ecstasy.
And what was your event called?
Genesis.
And where did the name come from? Was it?
Right, so the name actually came from, and it's a combination. This is Wayne, who was my partner in Genesis. He used to love the group Genesis.
Right.
But actually, my mum was very biblical. She was like a devout Christian.
Right.
And, I grew up, I'm not saying I practiced as I should have done, but grew up with Bibles in the house. And obviously Genesis, what is it? Right, Genesis. I thought Genesis is chapter 1 of the Bible. So I pulled it open, in the beginning, I thought this is a great name for the event. And went down to the flyer shop that I've been going to for years to get the flyers made on Dalston High Road.
Right.
We looked at this little picture of Zeus. We see this picture of Zeus on there. We said, we'll stick that on the logo. There's another little picture of it on chapter 1, the flyer, which incidentally is actually exhibited now in a modern history museum. Wow. How's that for you?
So with Wayne, did you know him before, or
I met Wayne. So I'd been doing the warehouse parties prior to this, and basically how that worked was I used to do sound system for years, and then I was invited to do the sound system at one of these early parties, the little ones that were going on around East London. And then I turned out every week I was doing one of these, and most of them were getting raided. And obviously I was there, I was used to this running around, the police chasing me and all that. So I was the guy that used to do the sound, all of those. Me and Cole Cox, actually. Cole used to start exactly the same one. It was either me or Cole that was called out to do these sounds, And then while I was getting my equipment taken away, he was getting his equipment taken away. It was a fucking nightmare.
Did you ever get it back? Or was it?
Yeah, most of the time we used to get it back. Do you know what I mean? Send someone down, a responsible adult. Do you know what I mean? To explain.
What, did you say we didn't know? It was
No, you used to get done for stealing electricity. So it wasn't actually illegal because you say you didn't break into the place. But the minute you put that plug in, you were dishonestly stealing electricity.
Is that why people started bringing generators?
Well, no, it wasn't even that. Well, the generators were just in order to basically fuel the fields, really.
Right.
But we used to hotwire straight into the main boxes of these warehouses, 3-phase, you know what I mean, to put lasers on and all that. But and that's how it started, as I said. So I brought Wayne in. I knew Wayne just, vaguely from the area. Right. He was friends with some friends of mine. I was doing parties. I said, listen, I'm jumping off now. I'm going to start doing warehouse parties. Right. Why don't we jump on and come do them together?
So when was the first event?
First event was the 10th of December 1988 at a little warehouse we had in Aldgate East. Wayne managed to get the warehouse of a friend of his, Dean. It was completely unsafe and highly dangerous. We turned up there in the day of the event. We were giving out flyers a week prior to it. We wired the stuff up, crept back in there at night, made 2 meeting spots, and then basically it just filled itself up. I think Rave at the Cave didn't happen that night.
So for the people that are watching, is that no clue about the old raves and how they worked.
Yeah.
Obviously, because it was legal, right? There wasn't a license.
Yeah.
You'd find these venues, and then you'd set up phone lines, didn't you?
They
Or
came
you'd have
later.
meeting spots.
The phone lines came in at the end of 1988 because mobile phones were in existence. It was Tony Colson Hayter that came on board with us, who done Sunrise. He had a massive phone like that, and basically it was the magic spot. So after Aldgate East, we found a huge warehouse, which was the old Springboks factory down in Hackney.
Right.
And basically we were going to put events on there. We put one on, and then one afternoon, this guy comes in this suit I'd known before because I'd done sand for one of their events, which was called Apocalypse Now at the time. Right. And he came in, introduced himself. He said, I'm Tony Costa-Later, I'm doing this event called Sunrise. And Sunrise was tiny at that time, remember. They were doing stuff in Greenwich, maybe 300-400 people. Right. So we were on equal par with them anyway. And then basically Tony sort of said, look, why don't we sort of partner up? And I thought, you know what, it's not a bad idea because he's going to be a different crowd to what we've got. The warehouse was the element to it. It was very central, and the phone was the magic thing because what we used to be able to do was we could have a guy on a moped, create 2 meeting spots, and then all the cars would turn up at the meeting spots. The kid on the moped had a pager back then, pagers. We'd page him to go to the phone box. So the phone box had to be quite close locality. He'd get to the phone box. We'd be in a warehouse with a phone and say, right, these are the directions. So when he'd come with a moped, literally it was like a convoy. Remember an old film Convoy?
Right,
Hundreds of cars, literally full of acid ravers, all going to the event. So they were coming from 2 directions, led by people on mopeds. Right. And of course, the police now are frustrated because you're passing through different areas, which meant different police forces. Right. So they couldn't actually coordinate anything to come and stop you.
So the meeting points would be out of the manor, basically.
Yeah, or central to it. But what it meant was they were in different station boroughs. Right. So when the crowds were going, the police had to be at the back of the convoy. Right. And they couldn't tail them off because of the traffic confusion and all that. So when everyone dispersed and landed at warehouse, they used to empty him really quickly. So before the police knew where they was, they had a crowd, 600, 700, 800 people building. Right. So they couldn't just disperse them. You can't put 800 people or 1,000 people out on the street in the middle of the night because it's chaos. So they had to literally leave us in there and let it finish organically. But, you know, that particular warehouse, Leaside Road, it just mushroomed. I remember it started to get bigger and bigger, and we'd done an event there on New Year's Eve. And New Year's Eve was like over 5,500 people there. And it was like, wow, this is massive. And the warehouse just opened up layer to layer. And then the following week was first week of January. Traditionally, no one goes. It's like clubs are dead. We know what it's like. Everyone's got bills to pay. And we were like, do we even do it this week? It's like, let's go for it. And we had 8,000 people turn up. And literally, it was complete roadblock. Everywhere it was madness. And we were closing the West End down because we were quite ingenious as well. We used to go down to the WAG Club, and there was a guy there called Jerry who had a mobile cab station. Right. And I said to him, listen, toot you two, if you come to the warehouse party, we're going to have them all over the place. You can sit your cab stand outside, so as people don't know where it is sometimes, they're in the middle of nowhere, they can have cabs. But in turn, I want you to give out flyers. So all your cabs, basically, in the West End, give them the flyer. So when people are leaving the club, say to them, by the way, there's a warehouse party, do you want to go? So we literally took over the West End in a period of maybe 6 weeks. Literally did. To the stage, there were clubs were closing early, and owners of clubs were coming down to the parties. I mean, we were having everybody there. Yeah, I remember, you know, down here we had Mini Vanilli, were the biggest group in the world at that time. You'd have people like Pet Shop Boys. You know, it was an abundance of, you know, Boy George was regular, you know, all these people who, you understand, these people were global superstars, were coming down to these grimy little warehouses. But it was what it was. The buzz was what we were doing was unique, and it was building and building and building. And
did you do the bar in there as well?
So yeah, but we didn't do alcohol because you know the early ones used to do drink out, but not Genesis. So we used to sell like water, Lucozade, Coke, soft drinks, and considering, so you're looking at, all right, so our basis of this gives you an idea, actually. I was thinking about it today. So a bottle of water was about 4 pence or 5 pence or 10 pence back then. You know, this is 35 years ago. A tin of Coke was about 12 pence. Everything was a pound. Right. Do you know what I mean? So you used to sell those at a pound. It was about 8 or 10 quid to get in. So you had 8,000 people. That's 80 grand in tenors. Right. You had everyone would drink over the space of 10 hours because we'd open maybe 10 o'clock and then we're close to 8 in the morning. So you'd exceed, you know, maybe 10 drinks each person would consume, plus the pillheads. So they're opening a tin of drink, leaving it on the side, forgetting it's even open, going back to the bar and boiling another one. Right. And we used to have sacks of pound coins, literally, walking out of there with. So, you know, when you think about those numbers 35 years ago, as kids, that kind of money was changing out, going through our hands with the minimal expenses. Remember, you know, the sound and light used to get, you know, a couple
So
of grand.
what were the expenses? There was the sound and light.
Sound and light was a few grand. So sound and light, we used to have a guy called Hans come in and do that. I had my own system, but used to use Hans. I think used to give him $3,000 a night. We used to obviously pay the security at that time. We brought in the ICF boys later on down the line, but at that time we had, I think, 10 security. Each of them got 100 quid a piece. Do you know what I mean? That was like $1,000, you know. So our outgoings was something like about maybe on a big night would be $6 or $7,000.
Right, okay.
You know. And
what were the DJs then? Because
so all the big guys passed through. So Tony Wilson, he was very big on the scene. But as I said, you were talking about Cole Cox and, you know, all who passed through, the Fabios, Groove Riders, Mickey Finn, literally, we had everyone, Fat Tony, Phil and Ben. It was a constant bill of DJs, but it wasn't about the DJs.
But those were the good ideas, though. Those were the good old days, because I think they were like 50 quid, 100 quid a night, weren't they?
Yeah, I think Cole was £300 with his whole sound system. Fabio grew for about £120 each.
Those were the good old days.
Who else? Was no disrespect to anyone. Tony sometimes got 50 quid, sometimes got 200 quid.
Even when I started promoting in '93, that it was sort of 300 quids, 400 quids.
Yeah.
You know, but now some of these DJs are getting millions and half a millions and hundreds of grand.
It's mad. They get private jets to go to events now. And I used to laugh and I think to myself, did I make a ricket here? Should I just stay spinning records? Because, you know, and fair play to them, because being a DJ, especially back then, I mean, they put in the work. They were with us as the promoters, you know, when the police would go in, they were smashing up their records, they were doing all kinds of shit, and they were literally running like we were in the shadows of the police constantly, you know. So they put in the graft, you know, they were proper soldiers, I must say.
Obviously, because you're selling the tickets, you obviously got the drinks. Did you get involved in the drugs as well?
At that stage, I wasn't involved in the drugs because we were too busy making money doing what we were doing.
The reason I'm asking is because, and this is, again, you know, I don't know if it's rumours or people talking, but back in the day at the illegal raves, obviously everybody was off their nuts. And, you know, as I said, I went to a couple of these early on, right? And, you know, the security were obviously quite heavy-handed, and obviously there was people like openly selling drugs. So I didn't know whether that, and at the time, bear in mind, I was like fucking 18, right? So I was a kid. So to me, it was all just like wide-eyed looking around. Wow, look at all these people dancing in this field or this warehouse. And because people were so blatant, the security was so heavy-handed, I used to just think, well, the promoters must be either getting paid off or doing it, you know what I mean?
Well, the thing was back then, because there were warehouses, they were down to no one. You had friends, loads of friends, who were selling drugs. That was their thing. And they would give people drugs, and people would sell drugs in there, and drugs were openly taken in there. And I remember the last party we'd done with before all the raids started happening was at Ferry Lane. We'd done 2 successful ones at a warehouse along the lake. Then we had to move the following week to one opposite the road. And I remember when the sun was coming up the morning and stuff, you know, I saw a guy walking around with a massive chalice pipe, right, just walking openly with it. And Lyndon see the DJ, Lyndon goes, Andrew, this is the end. He said, look around the walls. And he was saying, all you could see, it was plainclothes police. You could just see loads of them in there, clocking it all. And you had a guy walk with a chalice and use everyone's off their faces. And we just knew what was going on in Scotland Yard then. So, it would be the end of it. And it was after that, we had a succession of about 13 raided parties, one after the other after the other. We were like public enemy number one. And then, you know, Sunrise then moved away. We separated with that relationship with them, and they moved into the fields and the bigger festivals. And Jarvis also, you know, he moved on to festivals with biology. And, you know, Jeremy and Tintin moved on with energy. So these festivals were tiny events we used to, you know, work with early on, and they kind of grew, and they went the legitimate route. And then I kind of diverted. We created a ticket agency called London Dance Tickets. That was in East London. It was by the Bow Bells, basically, where the church was. Across the road, there was a car front. The Hunt brothers had it. And obviously, you know, they were quite well-known guys in East End then. So we had a ticket agency there on their site, and that was under surveillance by the police, as could be expected, for a long period of time. And suddenly they were going to, the police, had surveillance on. One morning, I had my door fucking kicked off. Thank God I wasn't there. They were investigating 2 murders, and had an uncle over from Jamaica who was, having a shower and stuff. And this wasn't even my house. They came to my mum's house, and they tried to drag him out of the shower naked, looking for me. And it becoming to the stage it was ridiculous. Right. And I thought sooner or later here, someone's going to end up getting seriously nicked. Right. So I decided to take a plane and fled to Paris, and then slipped to Miami, and then flew down to Jamaica, where I spent about 5 years and started to get involved, got married.
Was you on that? Would you say you sort of went on the run because you just thought it?
I was on the run, yeah. Completely on the run, because sooner or later, whether it wasn't particularly one specific crime they were going to have me for, they would have had me for something. I just done too much. I was doing too much. Do you know what I mean?
What was the worst thing? I mean, did you ever have any aggravation at any of these sort of illegal raves, or was it mainly just the police?
To be honest, it's really the police, because we had to get a strong firm who was the door. The door started off basically, we had like a bunch of 12 guys on there. All of them were quite, were well known. A lot of them were football hooligans, a lot of them were armed robbers. But you got to understand, I can say it as well because he's my friend and he's like Vicky Dart. He was a prolific armed robber. And there was lots of versions of Vicky out there in Caddington. And these guys were coming, and I mean, Vic's story, I don't know if you know Vic's story, but,
great,
literally went to the penthouse.
I like his book, The Bank Robber Diaries.
Classic, and he's ended up kidnapping an old Bill, having back in the car on a robbery from a nightclub. So when you had robbers like that who were serious about their craft, we had hundreds of thousands of pounds at the door. You had to have a firm that could protect them. Absolutely. Not they could protect them against it, but where a lot of our guys were tanners do stick together generally.
And they were more, I suppose really the security there, they weren't really bothered about if somebody was illegally selling drugs. They were more about making sure you were all right, making sure the money was all right.
That's what it was about. Yeah, if people were bringing in drugs, it wasn't a problem. I got involved heavily in manufacture distribution of ecstasy after we stopped warehouse parties, because we did have access to all the doors of all the clubs. The super clubs were getting opened, and it made sense for me to merge into that business.
So what happened? So before you went on the run, what were the things that you were sort of? Can you talk about the things you worked to?
So before I went on the run, I was involved in manufacture and distribution of ecstasy. Right. So that's what happened. There was various pills coming into the market. I knew about them because of the warehouse parties, and obviously our parties were flooded with pills. Right. And as the warehouse parties started to, come to an end, the super clubs began to open, which was going to happen because the breweries were really, if the truth be known, behind it, closing down the warehouse parties because no one was drinking, the Epstein was getting emptied, people weren't using pubs anymore. So the power that the breweries had with government at that time was immense, especially the Conservative government. So they put a squeeze on us. They started to get huge licences, opened huge venues, and then you had the birth of the super clubs. And obviously, with all the contacts we had with the doors, with the people who were selling drugs previously at our parties, it was a simple chain. What it did was obviously, first of all, start off with a good, supplier, which I had overseas, who could, give us volumes of ecstasy at the right price. But then it was a question of manufacturing ourselves, creating pills that could be looked at as a brand and sold.
So you was bringing stuff in. Whereabouts was they coming in
from?
With
Holland. This comes from Holland, yeah.
So the drugs were coming from Holland, but then you also had somewhere in the UK.
Yeah, after we had a very great pills coming from Holland called the Dove. It was a very established, one of the first established ecstasy tablets that was really out there on the scene. And then that obviously ran for a good 2 years, really, to be honest. That was a solid pill, which was, kind of dominated that club genre.
Do you know what? I've got to ask you a question, Mike, because bearing in mind that, I went out raving, in 88, 89, etc. Then I started giving out flyers and selling tickets, and then I eventually started putting on events in 93.
Yeah.
And I did my first event on the 11th of December, 93.
How mad is that? Wow.
At the Roller Express in Edmonton, which was North London.
How mad is that?
That's the day after you did yours.
So the Roller Express is quite a mad thing because one of my partners in Genesis, I don't know the involvement we had in it, but they did have involvement in the Roller Express in Edmonton.
Well, it's Finbar, wasn't it?
Well, Finbar had fronted it, and there was Keith and Mark Wheeler and a few people who were like, around us and stuff. I know had invested some money into that. So, but it was Finbar who fronted that, yeah.
Everybody used to say, the Doves were the best, the this, the that, blah, blah. And then obviously over the years, there's all these funny names like, Apples, Doves, Mitsubishis, all these different names for these things. But do you think the quality changed, or do you think that where people were taking them, that they just become immune to it? Because for me, it's like if you make a film and you have a formula of making a film and it works and it's successful, you would carry on, unless you obviously want to diversify and keep changing it up. But if you have any business, if you have like a formula that works, why don't they just keep doing
because
Doves?
right, so basically what happens is like so Dove and similar pills came about because they put a brand on it. Before that, they were burgers. So there's speckly burgers and you had yellow burgers, and they were very simplified, and they were just basically coloured with food colouring. Do you know what I mean? But when you had branded pills, what branded pills done? First of all, put an embossment logo on it meant they were a specific brand that were covered. Right. But then also they started to do ingenious stuff. So they used to actually put coating on them, seal on them. So each pill used to weigh 0.2 of a gram approximately. So you just count them, used to get them, used to weigh them. So like I think it was 5,000 pills was a kilo. And then you used to literally put them on a scale, just throw them in, and then you'd wrap them and you put cotton wool at both ends to ship them.
Right.
Now, what happened was the breakages were huge. And then when we got a chemist involved, he actually put a coating on them. So the breakages were less and less and less.
Where did you find a chemist?
Well, that's a really interesting story. Because, you know, it wasn't, and you know, the mad thing is not even that hard to really find people like that. Because you put such an emphasis on, you know, it's a laboratory, it's a bloody simple process.
Right.
And, you know, to access a pill machine, even back then, if you knew what you were doing, you could actually get them through, you know, if you had someone, obviously, you could put up a company that seemed to be a bona fide pharmaceutical company, you could get a pill machine.
Right.
You could get the chemicals, obviously. Some of them had to be imported, the MDMA, things like that. But if you had someone who knew what they were relatively doing and had experience in these kind of things, you were good to go.
Right.
And remember, there were people trying to make their own pills in straws and shit like that. So back then, there was like everyone and their dog doing it. So it made complete sense. You didn't have to, well, you obviously did have to worry about manufacturing them here because, you know, the problems of getting the materials there, but you didn't have the risk of bringing them from Holland because, again, every time you export something, you're taking a chance of it getting caught at customs, you know, and then obviously you have to pay a cover company, whether it's, you know, going to come in, you know, Dutch apples or you're going to bloody well put them in flowers, wherever they're coming down in, you've got a company that's going to have to receive it, or if you're trying to piggy bank them and pull them off, you've got someone who works in the market who can yank them off for you. So all that hassle was then alleviated when you could produce them out.
So that really was the natural progression. You bought them initially from Holland. Was that where the Doves come from, Holland?
That's where they came from.
Okay. Yeah. But were you able to replicate those or not?
People replicated them.
Right, okay.
And that was the biggest problem with not just Doves, but lots of other pills as well. Because once people figured out, you know, they're a good selling pill, people would replicate them. That happens with all pills as well, naturally, because it ain't bloody hard to get an embossed logo made, you know, and stamp them. And then what happens is their balance of ingredient might be different to your balance of ingredient, and therefore that's where you have the fluctuations in the pills.
Right.
And your answer to the question is actually pills are technically stronger now than they were back then. But your resilience levels of people is different now because people are taking pills and they were consuming more and more. So where they buzz on one or half of one, they took 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. And the chemicals also that are used, the compounds to put them together, slightly changes, you know. So, you know, but what I will say to young people, it's like playing Russian roulette. And that's what it is. You drop a pill in your mouth, it's untested by untested pharmacists, you know. Anyone can be making those. God knows what they're putting in them when they haven't got certain, you know, ingredients to put in them, which are the correct balance.
Right.
And, you know, every pill you put in your mouth could be a death sentence.
But when you did it properly. So
we thought we did it properly, but there's no such thing as properly, okay?
Right.
It's like playing Russian roulette. You know, as I said to you, we didn't go through one of the massive pharmaceutical companies and spend hundreds of thousands of millions of pounds having them chemically tested over a period of years, literally getting him the chemicals.
There wasn't any phase 2, phase 3 trials.
Listen, I'll tell you now, they were literally zero to hero. They were like going in there, you know, and making batches of pills, literally, you know, because they had to mask up. Because if you put a coloured pill, let's say you put the food colouring in, I mean, when you put yellow in there, geezer would come out like the Tango Man because all the pills, the machine would be going, all the dust would be up in the air, and they'd be literally stained like bright orange or bright yellow. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
So you used to have them all masked up, all thinking like that, because going into a doctor's surgery, do you know what I mean? Again, 35 years ago, this was quite primitive, you know, pill making techniques, you know.
And how many would you manufacture? I mean, did you ever count how many?
So we used to bring pills in, I suppose. Pills brought them up. They grew massively. So they used to bring them in bulks of 5,000. So the 5,000 drops, basically, used to bring them in from Holland. So they it moved from 100,000 to 250,000 to 500,000. That's how that was progress was.
And that's how, when you was manufacturing here?
No, that's how it was coming over.
Right.
And when we were manufacturing here, they were probably about the same quantities.
Wow. That's a lot, isn't it?
A lot of pills, yeah.
And then what happened? Did the warehouse get raided?
It was time to go, yeah.
Right.
Without getting too far into the
Before you go on holiday in Jamaica.
Into the fine detail, Jamaica was a really nice place to go for a very long holiday at that time, you know.
Right. Did you talk to people back here though?
All the time, yeah, of course, yeah.
Did you make the right call? Obviously,
I made the right call, 100%. I did, yeah, at the time. Right. And it was a good call as well because things were closed down here anyway, full stop.
Right.
And I went there, and it was a question of changing into a different life, which it was a bad one because I was told to go out to keep a low profile. I had family out there who were quite influential, let's say. And I said, what we do, keep it quiet, keep it cool, chill out. First thing I want, being a bit of a woman, I wasn't fat as I was now, I was not a bad looking fella back then. Right. So, I ended up, being a romantic man on the island, and I met a girl, her father was a prominent politician. She fell pregnant. I have a son with her. She sadly died of breast cancer while I was in prison. But obviously that was quite a high profile, relationship. Then mid through that relationship, I met another girl who was Miss Jamaica World, and then I ended up marrying her and having a child with her. So of course I was in the paper every day because he was Miss Jamaica, the jewel of the Caribbean. Right. And then this guy that's supposed to be keeping this really low profile, suddenly this English guy is in every fucking local newspaper there is. So that was obviously spanning that. Them relationships both, unfortunately, they fell apart.
Right.
And I then decided it was time to, diverse myself into smuggling, which I had great connections.
And that was in Jamaica, right?
That was in Jamaica, yeah.
Right,
so
okay.
I had a lot of extended family. My parents were very renowned people. They brought a lot of people here in the 50s and 60s. And I had selections of people I knew who, I called uncle. Lots of them, and auntie, loads of them, who were on a different path in life, who met Jamaica in the 70s, made themselves financially secure. Some of them people were kind of involved in a criminal underworld here, and they obviously went back to Jamaica and they kind of merged in there, and they were involved in illegal banks, but in terms of, getting money, launched, launder, obviously large-scale marijuana smuggling. And I just kind of, fell into that group of people, and I was shepherded into it.
And it was marijuana?
Started off with marijuana.
And was that through Jamaica into the West, like Europe and America?
No, so the marijuana thing, we started off basically using Spitalfields Market, which was a, perfect, obviously, route to go. So 12, days by sea, 8 hours by air. And what we used to do is obviously, create what we call ganja farm, which is ganja farm. You go on there, you buy a lot of marijuana from local farmers. You create a camp on there, which you press and squeeze the marijuana, obviously seal it, bring it to Kingston, and then conceal it in goods and send it over. So we started like that, And
what was, because obviously, marijuana stinks, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, even if you have the resin, that smells as well. So obviously, when you started the actual smuggling process, was it like an ingenious thing? You had to keep coming up with new ways, or was it just simple? You just went, right, we're going to put it in here and pay someone off.
We used lots of, right, so obviously people are paid off definitely at that end because obviously everyone's in the coup. But what we used to do was obviously, working with experienced smugglers. So for example, when the marijuana is, we get it, it's manicured, which means basically it's gold. We've been clearing all the sticks and the seeds out of it. That's then compressed into whatever product we're going to send it through in. So it might be tins, it might be blocks. Those are basically taken, they're shrink wrapped, then they're taped. Then over that goes we used to use a cure basically, and I used to use pimento, and other stuff. People use sulfaga, things like that, and basically that creates as a dog repellent. And then over the top of that then goes more shrink wrap and more tape. And generally speaking, it doesn't. We used to have a dog up at the airport. So what used to just pay the hands, they used to come down, put the dog over all the gear to know it's safe and there's nothing in it leaking. Then we'd put it on the consignment basically. It was a different company was coming, legitimately bringing goods into England. We used to obviously set up a bogus company that then divert some of those goods to us, or we'd have people in the market who could get to those boxes.
What was the company called Marijuana to You?
We had more companies with the company's ass. It was like literally like that. And we were imported huge amounts of marijuana, £7,000-8,000 at a time. Like upwards of that. And so we were really hitting it, false containers, we were putting false backs on containers, false container floors, as well as, piggy banking products. So we were using constant new methods, to always, circumvent the system.
You must have been making a load of money out of that.
Well, yeah, because obviously, you're in a business basically where the product you're getting, for an example, product down there was £50 a pound in weight, marijuana. Right. By the time it was cleaned and, packaged and wrapped, and it was probably included the bank customs to send it, costing maybe £150 a pound to send. Right. And then obviously what clearances you've got here, depending if you're going, if you're paying off bank customs, which obviously is more with white powder, but if you're paying off, a couple of guys that work in the market, you're probably landing a pound of marijuana here at 200 sterling pounds a pound, which sells for £2,500 a pound.
Wow.
So profits like that, you can afford to lose. You can afford to lose 3 or 4, 5 or 6, consignments.
I mean, when you actually started it, obviously you took all these precautions, you got all these people paid off, and it's all sort of, it's a little sort of sausage factory. It's all sort of going through.
Sausage factory, yeah.
When was the first time that you actually, somebody sort of rumbled it, or somebody?
Well, it used to happen quite regularly, and a lot of laugh about it. That wasn't even funny, but when we used to put stuff through, a lot of times there were people legitimately own the companies who knew nothing about it were getting locked up. So it was a situation where you put a consignment through and customs rumble it, and then they actually turn up at the market. The guy who owns his company, knows nothing about what we're doing because we're piggy banking his stuff to get our barrow boy to pull it off before he gets to work. He's getting fucking locked up. Getting put on remand for 7 months, or the customs brought a big fucking case against the guy. The guys.
I suppose the only good thing is he could genuinely say, I don't know what you're fucking talking about.
Yeah, but of course, can you imagine the stigma that he's getting? Everyone, he's been nicked, Terry's in prison for fucking smoking weed. I knew he was selling weed. I knew he was doing that. That's why he's got such a big stand. And then, of course, a straight person getting locked up, put in prison for something you ain't done. They're the potential miscarriages of justice, of course. When they go to court, always, usually 9 times out of 10, the case is pulled apart, do you know what I mean? And they realise it's been done, but the police were so eager to get convictions, they come up. Weed was quite good. If it was a small amount of weed, they actually, most of the time, would take the weed off and wouldn't nick people, wouldn't follow it. They just used to let it go through. Because if it's and it's different.
Right, with this stuff, somebody I spoke to recently, because I obviously like to find out about this stuff, because obviously I'm always looking, not just
for... Not about getting the business, are you?
No, absolutely not. I just like making films about it. I like making films about it, documentaries about it, TV shows about it, and podcasts about it.
Good.
But no, I'm not thinking of going down that road.
I don't be visiting Whitemore.
But somebody was saying to me that a lot of the people that do this stuff, they actually give... they sometimes tip off customs, or they give one away. So that, and sometimes the customs say, "Look, we got to nick someone, we got to do something." And I mean, was that happening with you or not?
Half of that's fantasy.
It's all bollocks, right? Okay.
People put so big players, right? They have 2 hard ends. So what happens is basically they have customs at that end and customs at this end, right? Right. They don't lose anything, all right? And talking about huge consignments, 3,000 kilos of cocaine. You're not going to lose that. You don't want to lose that. There's too much money at risk. So paying off corrupt authorities at both ends, you've got access to them, is a safe, secure way. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. On a small level, you do have petty kind of thing, and then you probably got one who's doing a bit of drugs, and then what he then does is he kind of wants to get out of the competition. He'll probably pick up the phone if he knows this one's bringing that, and do it basically to knock him out of business. Not even as a deterrent, probably to get their stuff through. They're just probably doing it to be malicious and nasty. Do you know what I mean? So that does happen. You'd be naive in the world to think those kind of things, but that's very much on a very basic, primitive street level. Right. Bigger criminals organised work together. Do you know what I mean? So there's no benefit bringing each other down. The whole benefit is working as a cartel or a syndicate in order to achieve the end goal. You allow all the others who are in the game, they're going to give the police enough arrest of their own incompetence and stupidity, getting themselves nicked anyway through not going through, using the right methods, taking the right precautions, the right security, and I mean, I see people sitting in prison, I think to myself, Christ, but you deserve to be here. You've literally put handcuffs on yourself, because people, they get involved in these kind of things and there's no thought or methodology behind any of it,
You've obviously become the king of the marijuana.
I hate to say those sort of words.
Well,
I was involved in smuggling.
One of the smugglers.
Yeah,
One of
yeah.
the marijuana smugglers.
I did play a sufficient role in that business.
From marijuana to you.
Yeah.
And then from there, when did you start thinking, well, actually, we're doing this, we'll do some other stuff as well?
Well, the reality of it was, right, when you had customs and stuff and you know your stuff's not going to be troubled, that changes the dynamic, because I also had connections through extended family to the Eastern Caribbean cartel, which obviously interlinked with what were the South American cartels, you know, and South American cartels in Colombia, you know, based up there, or Peru or Bolivia. It's actually from Peru, it's across, it's Guyana, it's Suriname, do you know what I mean? It's Venezuela. So you've got variations of jump off points, you know, and, you know, cocaine obviously is a very financially profitable product, and it's incredibly cheap as well. Was it
so? If you compared like all the different drugs, the ecstasy, the marijuana, and then the coke, would you? And obviously there's heroin as well. But what would you say was the one that was the money maker?
I wouldn't want to obviously start putting out an advert for young people to get involved in drug smuggling. That's the last thing I'd ever want to do. But in the reality of it, marijuana yields, obviously, you know, from the Caribbean, yields huge profits. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say skunk or these things these people produce now create huge profits, as that does. Coke, I've never ever dealt with heroin. Cocaine is something, again, if it's coming from source, it's huge profits. Again, you're talking about, you know, prices, I understand, have gone up, but, you know, you used to just pick up comfortably, you're not even buying at pace, but buying at block powder, you know, $1,000, $1,500 a kilo in Colombia. You know, you could then jump that off for, you know, get it across the border, get it out of the country at sort of like $3,000 a kilo. You know, you could do the same from off of Guyana. You could jump, so you could be sending coke, say maximum British sterling, £2,500 a kilo. By the time the sums are big enough, paying off customs and the people you're going to pay, you're probably standing at £5,000 a kilo, which would resell her wholesale for 25 grand a key. So that's a huge profit, and it will sell very quickly as well. You know, whereas marijuana might take longer. Ecstasy is a less profit margin because of the amount of chemicals, tablets being brought in, and shipping costs as well. And manufacturers look a lot better. But again, of them all, obviously, cocaine is the quickest turnover, but it also comes with the biggest sentence. Marijuana is always a safer bet because it's obviously huge turnovers coming from the source, and it's very small sentencing. But
like you said, because you had that thing where you were getting it in, you just thought, well, we might as well add some more stuff to it.
Customer based, isn't it? You're going for supply and demand, like Tesco's. If Tesco's see a product, you know, and you're selling Coca-Cola or you're selling noodles, and there's a trend in buying noodles, they're going to stock up with noodles. Do you know what I mean? And that's all it is. If you've got a trend and you've got a market for that specific product, you tend to bring it. So what would you say is the maddest method you use to bring stuff in? I mean, obviously you've got the customers, blah blah blah, but there must be loads. We used to do one called a torpedo, and that basically used to go, there's a ship in Ocherias which used to loads of sugar cane basically, and it comes to the Tate and Lyle factory in Canning Town, Silvertown, and what we used to do is get a diver to go under there, to make a pan basically, fill it with product, used to go under it, dive it, and used to bolt it on. And then what it used to do was it used to sail from Jamaica down to Silvertown dock, which is an unsecured dock. So we used to get divers basically. We had a couple of guys at the SBS, and they used to put all the kit, like so bubbles doesn't come up on the thing, all the rib boats and all that. They used to go in to where the not the bus garage, the clean buses next door to where you could jump off on the dock. So you used to jump off on the dock at night when the ship was in. They used to go under there, but they had to be really skillfully trained because these things weigh hundreds of tons, these ships, and they can move. So these guys used to actually, and it's pitch black under there because it's dirty water, remember? So they used to go, you know, military, and they used to actually check for mines. So they're familiarised with working in those environments. But if that ship moves and you're against the wall, you're dead, you're crushed instantly, right? So it's a really dangerous job. Also, the water temperature is, it's below freezing. So we used to send them down there basically. They used to go in there, unclip the pan, and then because you're getting this massive metal thing off, the disruption, we used to launch a rib in the Thames, bring the rib down water, and they used to actually literally have to bring this thing attached to the rib back downstream, like a James Bond thing.
I was just about to say, it sounds like
James Bond, like a James Bond operation, yeah. And some of the smuggling stuff we used to do was literally, it was, you know, it wasn't, you had your regular day-to-day smuggling where you're throwing a few boxes on the back of a fucking container full of yams or full of whatever, and your guys at the market are unloading it, swapping the boxes back, and, you know, you've got your other stuff where you're making fibre glass, you know, products like your plantains and all that. And I've seen some fucking hilarious ones of that. I remember I used to visit, you know, people in the market who used to work, didn't work. I remember one day someone's office and he's in there and he's selling plantains, completely oblivious to him. An African lady's bought 2 boxes of plantains. She's come back with them and she's complaining that the plantains are tough. And he's going, what do you mean they're tough? He's going, I want my money back, they're tough. So he's got his teeth, he's hit against the fucking desk and he's just covered in white powder. It was like the snowman. It turned out that fucking someone had put a shipment on there in the plantains, fiberglass plantains full of coke. Right. And of course he's thinking, what the fuck? Like, the geezers come. So people been buying these plantains. And it was hilarious because one Indian fella who had a shop, I mean, he had this whole smashed up tatty fucking van. So he's trying to work out who's bought these plantings. Fucking a week later, this geezer comes back in this brand spanking new Mercedes van.
He's definitely
got plantings.
You got more plantings, yeah.
He's asking for plantings. He'll have a pallet. And they're thinking he's fucking had them plantings, man. Right, do you know what I mean? So there were funny stories. And, you know, there were... You could be here for the whole day if I was to tell you some of them.
You got to give us a couple more because they're good. They're good. You started
the
now.
Sardine. We used to do sardine. So the sardine base, used to get the air pallet,
right,
and then we used to put blocks or weed, whatever, at the bottom of it, right, and then put across the top of it the aluminium covering. Right. And then what we'd do is the pot rivets, we'd stick them in vinegar so they look rusty. Right. So we'd drop the pot rivets back in there, right, and then what would happen is if someone looked at it, you'd think it was an old pallet, air pallet. But then what we did is when we got the pallet, took the stuff off of it, we used to pull it back like a sardine tin. Right. So it used to literally peel back like that. Right. So we called that one the sardine. Right. You know, it was like fucking, you know, there was ingenious amounts of stuff.
You've got the torpedo. What's the other
There
one?
were so many. The false back containers were another popular one. Right. We used to, you know, build 2 feet from the back of the container. So we'd load it and then fill it to the brim with things. This was, of course, before they had the laser pen. Right, but they just go in there and say, oh, then it's 2 foot short. Right. And, you know, so we had, it was just, I mean, it was endless amounts of things.
Did you come up with all this stuff?
Some of them, there's no such new thing in smuggling. You know, everyone thinks, oh, he's telling all the secrets. There are no secrets. Right. Everyone's done it all before, you know. Right. We very used to use more mules, but if I used them, there was a safe get out of jail card. One we used to do was, you used to get a suitcase, 2 identical Samsonite suitcases. One we'd put a scratch along the end of, right, and then we'd load it to the brim with stuff, put some rubber in it, foam so it couldn't make any noise. Right. Get a passenger down there, then we'd get him to have the one real suitcase with his clothes in, right, but the other one's the one with the product in. So what he'd do is when he comes back off of holiday, he goes up to Curacao, he picks up the one with the gear in it, which has still got a tag, by the way, right, and he walks up to customs. And if they let him through, they let him through. If they stop him, they say, what's the combination? And he'd give them a combination, it don't open. Right. So then they'd obviously sit him down, they'd fucking Jimmy open the suitcase after a couple of combinations fail, full of gear. They arrest him, take him to interview, and he would say, listen, mate, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. That is not my case. Do you know what I mean? And he'd have him there for about an hour. He'd be claiming completely innocent. Of course, round the Curacao would be this other suitcase going round. When they go and pick that up and get it, they'd bring it back into the interview room. Presto, gives him the combination. It opens up the case with his dirty clothes in there. So then you would have an instant get out of jail card because they could not physically impossibly be proved that he put that case on there. He didn't have the capability to do it, and he's innocently picked up the wrong case. Do you know what I mean? So that was the kamikaze, you know what I mean? So we used to throw him in there on a regular basis. So, you know, there was hundreds of methods we used, hundreds, literally. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have to get you back, I think.
You might have to. You could just do one on smuggling methods.
The Smuggler's Guide,
yeah, definitely.
So obviously, you're doing this, you're obviously making money, it's all going well. When did the wheels start coming off?
Well, the wheel came off for me. I was straight. I was at the game. I was kind of, you know, I left it all behind. I moved to Essex. I changed, supposedly on purpose, changed my life. Right. Like anything, I knew someone from old who was still fucking around with things. They said to me, you know, they wanted to get access to bits and pieces. And, you know, don't get me wrong, it's no one's fault, right? But your own when you get into trouble like this. And anyway, I arranged something for him and I said, okay, not a problem. You know, I'm going to organise this for you. Then last minute, he said, you know, he can't get no one to follow him down and get it. I'm like, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean? I'm not going with you. And it was a reality of either losing the stuff or following up there to get it. So I said to him, what I'll do is I'll drive behind you. If the police appear, I'll take them out the road because worst way, not the police car out the road, I'm going to go for 6 months or 3 months. I'm a criminal. Well, I'm sort of a criminal. I'd moved out the heavy life, but I was still an embedded criminal. So I'll take it 3 or 6 months. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
For the cause of the, you know, for the greater cause. Anyway, went and picked up this material, driving back with it, only a couple of 6 keys, and then fucking police car comes. I drive the police car off the road in my Range Rover, and this guy just decides to pull up in a lay-by to get arrested. And of course, now I've committed myself, I've put myself in with him, and then the final finale, of course, was they wanted me for a long time, and he'd been giving people up, as I found out in court when we had half a dozen different people who'd been getting arrested every week, literally after leaving him. And then he threw it on me and tried to say that I had him under duress, which was a load of bollocks. But the police wanted this because they wanted me for so long.
Right.
And that was it.
So he actually stitched you up. He set you up, you think?
Yeah, but stupidity set me up because I should have known better. I've been in this game for too long, do you know what I mean, to try to, you know, even get near it again, you know. So I put myself in jail. That's the way I see it, you know. And
how long did you get? What was
15 years?
Fucking hell. And that was, I mean, obviously, did you appeal?
Yeah, I appealed, got down to 10.5 years because it was a 7-year sentence. I got a confiscation order, which I had to pay, which was £1.3 million. If I didn't pay that, I would have got another 7 years on top of that. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, all things being equal, you know, it was a severe sentence for what it was. But the reality of it was a long time coming. Do you know what I mean?
I suppose if you added it up over 35 years.
Come on.
Would you say it was a touch?
No, it was, what happened was this was mad the other day. A couple of months ago, I was invited to the Old Bailey to this knife crime conference, and you had you know, a barrister there who was, you know, she hadn't had a great upbringing, but she was looking after her. She was a QC now, or a KC now, and she was representing, you know, representing a lot of these kids who were on joint enterprise, talking about that. You had all these kids there from the pre-referral unit who were in the witness box, and basically it was a great event, you know, talking about why not to carry a knife, why not to be involved in the gang. And the judge, I was there with someone, they were going, that judge keeps looking at you, Andrew. And I'm thinking, like, he looks familiar, doesn't he? But I couldn't think who it was. And at the end, they came out with, we'd like to thank Judge Katz for staying over at the Old Bailey. Courtroom run, this was Old Bailey, staying on tonight. But of course, he didn't look like the guy that said that I knew, because the guy that sentenced me to 15 years had a big wig on, and his big gown on, and there was this little guy with this little bald head and this little suit. So I thought, what do I do here? What a tricky one. So I got up, I walked through where the kids were in the witness gallery, I walked out the bottom, and I said to him, you don't remember me, do you? And of course he's racking his brain thinking I'm someone, because it's a thing for the kids and all that, so I'm either something to do with the judicial system or from some charity, which I was doing in the capacity of a charity. And he goes, no. And I said, you gave me 15 years. And he was like, oh my God, what's your name? And I said, Pritchard. He said, Jesus Christ, of course I remember you. Because of course, when you're in appeals, you get out and stuff, they have to know, because they think you could be at large now and you're after them. So I said to him, I looked at him and I said, I smiled. He goes, I'm so sorry. He said, you know, I really, you know, don't like giving sentences like that. I really don't want to give you that sentence. I said, well, why did you?
Yeah.
And he goes, look, it's sometimes the powers that be. And I realised at that moment in time, he had no control over what sentence I was going to get. The big authorities made that sentence for me to happen to me. And he said, I'm sorry. I said, no. I said, don't be sorry. I said, I'm going to thank you for giving me that sentence. So had you not done it, I said, I'm changed. I won't be here today. Okay, so you actually triggered the change. And he was like in amazement. And then the bizarrest thing happened after that. I had to record what it was, so I put it on my LinkedIn, and another judge came on there, he commented and said, this is amazing as a judge, I've always wondered what that experience would be like. Another judge, woman judge, she came back and said the same thing. Another judge came back and said, look, how would you feel about speaking at a judges' convention in Warwickshire? And I was like, wow, you've got one of the most targeted, organised criminals here, which I was at that time, and the biggest release is to never have judges around people like me. That's the rule, because if we get around them, we could corrupt the whole system potentially, and the powers that people would never let that to happen. And I thought, technically, that I've changed, because you would never invite Fox into the chicken coop. Right. Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what I'd have done though, just for a joke? I'd have put an envelope, white envelope, with a load of Monopoly money, and put their names on each one, and come in and go, judges, I just want to let you know, I've left you all a gift, right? If you don't want to take it, you can leave it.
Well, with my past, I'll tell you what, Terry, with my past, even if I don't say it as a joke, I'd end up getting 15 years.
Okay. So probably not the... Yeah. I mean, that sort of thing I'd have done, it'd been funny, but I get what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, even as a joke, I'd have got the sentence for that. Do you know what I mean?
But honestly, it was just Monopoly money. It was all a joke. No, we think they're definitely trying to corrupt all these judges.
I don't think you've invited back either.
But it's amazing, really, how you've gone from... I mean, you've got such an amazing story. I mean, I know you wrote a book, but obviously that book was only up to a point, wasn't it? So
yeah, well, I wrote the book in 2006 after Donald McIntyre documentary. I thought I might as well, capitalise on it. I released the book Urban Smuggler, but of course the book was, based on the cigar story that I obviously tailored for the defence for the coconuts and the cocaine. But then obviously when I got sentenced, it's like the game's over. They know I've fucking corrupted a load of people.
Just in case anybody doesn't know that story, could you just share it with us? The cigar.
Yeah, I was arrested in 2004 for half a metric ton of cocaine, basically, at Spitalfields Market. It was the biggest drug seizure in the country at that time. £100 million it was valued at, and that was two, completely insane trials. Basically, we all went through, all got acquitted, because obviously I'd paid off corrupt customs and corrupt police to basically, create as much chaos as could be done. And obviously I was the instigator, the orchestrator of that. There's a documentary was made out about it called Cocaine and Coconuts, because it was being filmed in real time, the whole
Where
case.
can people watch this? Is it on?
I think it's on, if you go on the internet, you put in Cocaine and Coconuts, Donald McIntyre, you'll get the McIntyre's Underworld.
Was it BBC? Was it BBC?
It was Channel 5 made that back then, yeah. It's still on now.
Okay.
And I wrote the book, and then obviously when I fell this time, I thought, Jesus Christ, that book's going to be used, which it was used against me in court. Right. So I took it out of circulation, I got the rights to it back, and I sat for 6 years in a cell when I decided to write my real story, and I kind of wrote a manuscript, which I've got now. I haven't released it or gone anywhere with it, because I don't want to do that. I've thought to myself, it's a very precious jewel, because it's not just about publicising crime or glorifying, it's about the journey, the fabrics of my parents and that whole generation that came here, and obviously the ducking and diving that then gets real, and then you go on your own and you live that life, and that life can, it's perilous, and it involves a lot of, I've seen 13 or 14 business partners murdered. I've seen shit happen, do you know what I mean? Right. You wouldn't anyone to see, so it tells the story of that journey. But where I am now today with the AP Foundation, it tells the journey of what we're doing for young people and getting them out of this shit,
I mean, genuinely, when you're ready to publish that, we should definitely make the movie or the TV series.
Well, I tell you what, let's get a publisher. Get me a publisher. So if any agents are out there or publishers, okay, I'm looking for a publisher, and you'll have a great, you'll have an amazing book. Best book you'll ever read.
I love to read that, Andrew.
I will.
Because
I'll give you the manuscript, because it's dynamite.
Love to read
honestly,
it. Love to read it. And I'll be honest with you, what fascinates me about true stories and true crime is people sometimes look at stuff and they go, that just doesn't sound real. It can't have happened, right? And they do say truth is stranger than fiction. But for me, that to me is something that I want to share with the world. And your story, what I love about it is you become a product of your environment. You've obviously fell into this life, and through, whether it's fate, whether it's the people you were around or whatever, you've gone through this journey, and you've done all these like mad things, crazy things. And then you've come out the other end, and then you've, like you said, the catalyst of it have made you sort of see the errors of your ways, but then you've actually gone, right, I'm going to do something good now, I'm going to help. And, if somebody had said to you probably in 2004, 2005, Andrew, you're going to be speaking at judges' conventions and you're going to be doing this, you'd be like, what are you talking about?
I know. So, it's stranger than fiction, as you said, and real is real. That's what it is, And when I realised what I'd done, and I'm able to talk about it now openly and honestly, it's the greatest tool there is, because, there is no fiction in my life. It's all fact and reality. Do you know what I mean? And
one thing that I think people that are watching this would be interested in, I mean, obviously, I think people like watching crime films, right?
Yeah.
And they like the glamour and the fun of it. But the reality is they only want that part. They wouldn't want the other part.
No.
And
both come together.
when you actually did get sentenced, and when you did go into your jail cell for the first time, I mean, you know, share with us, you know, how you felt, what you went through.
Well, that journey, remember this, I was a category Prisoner. I was held at Belmarsh, so I didn't even go to trial at the Old Bailey. I went to trial at Woolwich. So they used to take me every single day, which was double shanked. So you had a set of handcuffs there with one officer. You got another officer handcuffed too. You got officer behind carrying your stuff under a tunnel, which goes from underneath Belmarsh Prison for a series of gates straight into the court. So you didn't even see daylight. So that was a journey. Every single day you go in what they call the Cat A suit, which is yellow and green. And then you'd be, you know, brought through this whole process, constantly strip searched, you know, at both ends, because you've got to be a category prisoner. And that's when you know it's serious, shit is serious, because that is it. And you're not going to see light of day. And you're never going to see light of day until you're released. Do you know what I mean? And that was the first daunting fact. I'd realised it can't get no worse. Right. And where you're going to get sentenced, where you're going to go to is hell on earth.
Right.
And that was the first thing. I thought to myself, look at me at this age. What do I need it for? You're looking at young guys there in their 22, 23 who are doing 40-year recs, 30-year recs. And you're thinking you're going to be surrounded by all these young people, kids, who are just setting off in their sentences. And what am I doing here? And that was another point that, you know, made me jump off. I thought to myself, these kids don't know what's coming for them. They're going to be my age, still in there serving those sentences. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people I know who have been to prison, and they've obviously reformed and they've done different things. Some of them haven't, incidentally.
Yeah, which happens, yeah.
And some people have said when they was in prison, they realised they made a mistake and they didn't want to ever go back, and they was going to change their lives like what you did. But then other people have found that when you're in that environment, and it becomes like you're in the school of the University of Crime. So you end up talking to all these people, and then when you're going to get out, it's like, oh, I'll connect you with him and her and whatever.
Yeah.
And then it all just carries on and on and on.
For younger people especially, they go in there, it's like a learning school for some of them, but it's a revolving door, they end up back in there. For older people, who's all they know. And it's the lifestyle, it's people around them. So if you're going to change, you've got to change people around you. Right. You can't do it any other way. So you've got to separate. So listen, you know what, brother? I love you dearly, but I have to leave you now. I can't be part of this life. Do you know what I mean? So that's the journey you've got to send people on. And then when you're in a position that you know that you can happily be around those people without being involved in business that they're involved in, you're fine. But you cannot do it from a position of still, you know, wanting to be halfway in, halfway out. You've got to be all the way out. And then if you're all the way out, you know, and do what I do now in terms of reforming, you know, getting involved with the young people, they have to then accept that as well. They've got to accept this is what you're doing. And when they can accept what I'm doing, then we can be friends.
Right.
But it's not a middle ground, you know.
Well, I've really enjoyed chatting to you today, Andrew.
Likewise.
I mean, it's been amazing, really, hearing your stories. And as I said, I still don't feel like we've even touched on it.
Yeah, we could be here for 6 hours, honestly.
Trying to cram 35 years into an hour and a half.
Too much,
it's still 2 hours.
As I said, there's so many things, but yeah. We touched the surface of a few of them.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Criminal Connection podcast. I'm the podfather, Terry Stone. And what a great guest Andrew Pritchard was. I bet you didn't know all that. Make sure you check out his book, Urban Smuggler. Great read. And make sure you stay tuned next week because we've got another fantastic guest.